This video is sponsored by Squarespace. The Star Trek Mythos is famous for its optimistic vision of the future. Whereas other works of science fiction show us marching towards a haunting dystopia or attaining many of our present problems for centuries to come, Star Trek stands out as a work of science fiction which definitively states the future will be better and brighter than the present we live in, and the human race will move beyond prejudice, poverty, and war. However, when we pose the question, is humanity good? Or to be more specific, do people naturally default to their good side rather than their bad side? It's interesting to note that Star Trek, despite its optimism, actually says the answer is no.
We can admit that we're killers, but we're not going to kill today. That's all it takes. Knowing that we're not going to kill today.
Who we are as human beings is a theme Star Trek has visited and revisited numerous times over the decades. This question is either posed directly to humanity itself, or metaphorically using the fictional alien races of the Star Trek universe as stand-ins for humanity. So just to be clear, when I refer to Star Trek's view of humanity, I'm talking about it on a thematic level. Everyone in Star Trek represents humanity, even if they're an alien in the plot. All the way back in Star Trek the original series, episodes like A Taste of Armageddon and Arena clearly outline the central thesis of Star Trek's view of humanity. We are a naturally brutish and savage race, petty, violent, and tribal. However, the optimistic flourish in many of these stories is that while humans are savage, our savagery can be controlled and overcome. The key to progress is to recognize when our base drives threaten to overtake us, and have the wisdom to override these drives and instead solve our problems rationally and intellectually.
We're a killer species. It's instinctive. It's the same with you. All right. It's instinctive. The instinct can be fought. We're human beings with the blood of a million savage years on our hands. But we can stop it. We can admit that we're killers, but we're not going to kill today. That's all it takes. Knowing that we're not going to kill today.
By taking this position, Star Trek aligns itself with the views of philosopher Thomas Hobbes. In his landmark work Leviathan, he posited that humans are primarily driven by fear, resulting in a condition of war of all against all. The way to contain this war is to civilize ourselves, to be ruled by a sovereign or institutions. Dutch biologist Frans der Waal called this veneer theory, the idea that civilization is a thin veneer which will crack if enough pressure is applied, resetting us all to our supposedly natural savage state.
Let me tell you something about humans, nephew. They're a wonderful, friendly people, as long as their bellies are full and their holosuites are working. But take away their creature comforts. Deprive them of food, sleep, sonic showers. Put their lives in jeopardy over an extended period of time, and those same friendly, intelligent, wonderful people will become as nasty and as violent as the most bloodthirsty Klingon.
Humanity in Star Trek's future is no longer plagued by prejudice, poverty, and war because we have evolved beyond it. They are simply more advanced than we humans of today, who are closer to our savage roots.
People are no longer obsessed with the accumulation of things. We have eliminated hunger, want, the need for possessions. We've grown out of our infancy.
This idea of humanity evolving into a better form of itself is intrinsically tied to the idea that all societies have natural growing pains. Greed, prejudice, and conflict are the natural results of a society or race of people who haven't yet found the wisdom or intelligence to control their savage instincts. This is one of the core reasons the Prime Directive is given so much weight in Star Trek. The invention of warp drive is seen as the threshold that a civilization crosses when it's ready to evolve and overcome its brutish nature. Star Trek places all societies on the same linear timeline of advancement. Initially cave-dwelling hunter-gatherers clubbing each other over the head for scraps of food, then organized kingdoms and empires, the subjects of which believe in supernatural deities, often leading to religious wars and persecutions. But around the time a society industrializes, radical scientific and technological progress is made. While there is still conflict between the nation-states who seek to control this knowledge, eventually a society reaches out into space, discovers it is not alone in the universe, and becomes united in a common cause. However, this progress can be delicate, and there always remains the looming threat of civilization regressing to a more primal state.
Millennia ago, they abandoned their belief in the supernatural. Now you are asking me to sabotage that achievement, to send them back into the dark ages of superstition and ignorance and fear? No!
Star Trek is also fascinated by the inverse, the concept of the enlightened humans of the future grappling with power even they, in their evolved state, aren't ready for.
Before long, we'll be where it would have taken mankind millions of years of learning to reach.
And what will Mitchell learn on getting there? Will he know what to do with his power? Will he acquire the wisdom?
Please go back while you still can.
A delicate balance must be maintained. We must develop new technologies so our survival doesn't depend on the whims of nature, but we must always have wisdom when using these technologies. We cannot advance too quickly or too slowly.
But my people are not ready to accept what you represent. And Krola is the best evidence of all. We must slow down. Allow those who are like him to join us in the present.
While Star Trek doesn't believe humanity is good by nature, its optimism comes from the idea that humanity can grow. We have the wisdom and intelligence to control our savage instincts and ensure technological progress never overtakes our sense of empathy or compassion. The message Star Trek wants us as viewers to take away is optimistic and humanist from a certain point of view, but there are a couple of problems. This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the ultimate tool for creating your own beautiful website. I recently redesigned my website galaxyclasspictures.com using Squarespace's cutting-edge design tools like Blueprint AI, which helped me generate a brand new personalized template, which I then customized using Squarespace's easy-to-use Fluid engine. Squarespace also helps with your site's discoverability with their built-in SEO and domain name features. You can optimize your website so it shows up more often in searches and secure your ideal domain name. No extra fees and no add-ons required. Jump over to Squarespace using the link below to start building your website and use the coupon code Coleman to get 10% off your first purchase. One of the reasons the Star Trek mythos has endured for so long is because of how inspiring it can be. Fans see this brighter future and want to see it realized for real. But while it showcases that future well, when it comes to how we in the real world can help create it, Star Trek is remarkably unhelpful. Humans in the 24th century are simply more evolved. They're simply better than our present selves. By focusing on the idea that humanity needs to have the wisdom to control our savage nature and mitigate the harm of technology, it foists the responsibility of the state of the world onto individuals. Essentially, the message boils down to this: humanity just needs to get good.
You've got to do better, Senator.
Star Trek is full of positive life lessons, but oftentimes they are presented on an individual level. Let That Be Your Last Battlefield is about racism, if that wasn't clear, but the conflict is centered on the clash between Bele and Lokai. The Measure of a Man is about dehumanization, but it's centered on the conflict between Data and Bruce Maddox. Drumhead is about paranoia and abuses of power, but it's centered on the conflict between Picard and Admiral Sati, and so on. There's nothing wrong with presenting societal conflicts on this level. In fact, having characters embody perspectives on a theme is a good example of strong writing. However, the issue arises with the message a viewer is meant to take away. Racism is bad, so don't be racist. Dehumanization is bad, so don't do that. Witch hunts are bad, so don't do them. No changes are made to the power structures which supported these conflicts in the first place. No changes are even suggested. The lesson is always to simply be better. That lesson isn't wrong, but it doesn't go far enough, and isn't exactly helpful to people suffering in the present day. Like, sorry homeless guy, it sucks you're living on the street, but don't worry, in 300 years poverty won't even be a thing because everyone will have realized it's bad by then. This could be why Star Trek is often so vague about how its future society works.
We work to better ourselves and the rest of humanity.
What does that mean exactly?
It means we don't need money.
And why almost every single series in the Star Trek mythos is squarely focused on Starfleet. This was pointed out in a recent commentary of mine by friend of the channel Daniel Orrit.
It's such a weirdly world-built franchise, Star Trek, in that there's so much content, and yet, even after all this time, we've still basically only ever seen it through the lens of the big Starfleet bucket on your head. And like, there's no like it's still not really world built. Like outside of the books and the beta canon and stuff like that. Like it's bizarre that a franchise can exist for so long and have so much content, and we still don't even really know what NCC stands for. And like, there's no like, and then it's like there's no money, but we won't get into that. Like, we won't detail anything. Like certain parts of it are exhaustively detailed, and loads of it is very, very vague, and it's a bit odd in that respect. Like I feel like something like Star Wars basically just like flatly increases in complexity across the board as it goes along, and like you can go and find out what like the architecture looks like on Corellia or how its local government works or whatever. Like they actually do fill everything out with information, whereas in Star Trek it's like really, really basic stuff about the nation and the setting is just not said at all ever, and it's just the life on the ship is the main lens for everything.
More commentaries like this, exclusive to Patreon for free, by the way. The bright future of Star Trek has no currency-based economic system at all. Replicators can give anyone anything they could ever want, and energy is abundant. But how is this society organized? How is the government elected? What kind of powers does that government have? I know I'm dangerously close to getting political here, but these are important questions to ask. Is the future society seen in Star Trek capitalist, communist, anarchist, syndicalist, or some new kind of ist we haven't thought of yet? Star Trek has never been able to answer these questions because its themes and ideas are only ever communicated on an individual level rather than a systemic one. And it all stems from the idea that the way to that brighter future is simply for human beings to be better, to control our savage nature, an idea based on the assumption that humanity is inherently savage by nature. Another assumption made by this thesis is the idea that all societies evolve along the same lines, cavemen to peasants to workers to liberated space explorers. However, recent anthropological research has revealed this isn't the case. As illustrated by this excellent Trexpertise video, which I'd highly recommend checking out, recent studies have found societies develop along individual paths depending on context. As Trexpertise relays in his video, the Inca Empire, for example, had one of the most extensive road networks in the world, far surpassing many of those in Europe, and yet the Inca barely used wheels. Their terrain was simply so mountainous that piling stuff into a wheeled cart would only make transporting goods harder, not easier. Yet the invention and mass adoption of the wheel, like warp drive in Star Trek, is often held up as a benchmark invention, a signal that a society has reached a threshold of progress when in reality it's not. Again, watch the Trexpertise video, it's really good. This idea is also seemingly contradicted by Star Trek's lore to a certain extent. Humanity invented the warp drive, yes, but the subsequent progress made by humanity in ushering in that brighter future was in large part thanks to the influence of the Vulcans. Without the Vulcans guiding humanity, bestowing and withholding certain technologies depending on whether the Vulcans thought humans were ready or not, would Earth have become the utopia it's shown to be? Then there's the Vulcans themselves. Though they invented warp travel centuries ahead of humans, their society remained largely stagnant. The Klingons, meanwhile, used warp drive primarily for conquest, giving in to their savage natures. Despite being technologically far ahead of humanity, the Vulcans and the Klingons quickly fell behind in other ways. Which brings us to the elephant in the room. Starfleet is kinda racist. Now, hold on, let me clarify here. I'm not trying to make some shallow hot take with the bold and provocative idea that the good guys are actually the bad guys. Ooh, crazy. I'm not about to make out that Star Trek as a mythos, as a story, is inherently racist in its themes and messages. Of course it isn't. I mean, just look at Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. You can't get less subtle than that. Star Trek's heart is absolutely in the right place. The entire mythos from the original pilot to the latest episode was produced to be a progressive, thought-provoking, optimistic and hopeful story, and it should be commended for that. However, just like the scientific process Star Trek idolizes, it should update its conclusions when met with new data. Unfortunately, Star Trek has been operating on some outdated assumptions concerning biology, history, and anthropology. Again, not out of malice or willful ignorance, this was simply the most up-to-date information available when Star Trek was created, and the writers simply extrapolated from there. However, these extrapolations have unintentionally created some implications and connotations which go against the progressive message the mythos seeks to embody. I'm not saying it's a total failure or you're a bad person if you're a fan. That would be like punching myself in the face if I was. Okay, are we on the same page? Good. So let's sum up the ideas Star Trek has communicated thus far. First, humanity is savage by nature, but through our wisdom and intelligence we can control that nature, overcome our base instincts, and evolve into better versions of ourselves, paving the way for a better and brighter future. Second, every civilization has growing pains like humanity does. At first, our savage nature gets the better of us, leading to conflict and suffering, but over time, as a society becomes more advanced and the people within it learn to control themselves better, civilization becomes stable and united. Taken at face value, there's a disturbing implication from these two ideas. The implication is that within the Star Trek universe, humanity is, by this standard, superior to everyone else. Humanity is the only race in Star Trek to properly balance its wisdom and intelligence with its aggressive, savage nature.
His negative side, which you call hostility, lust, violence. We see here indications that it is his negative side which makes him strong. That his evil side, if you will, properly controlled and disciplined, is vital to his strength.
In contrast, the Vulcans have overcorrected with their doctrine of logic, resulting in a stagnant society. The Klingons, meanwhile, have let their savage nature get the better of them, resulting in a society embroiled in endless conflict. Because of this naturalist argument, the implication is that the various races in Star Trek behave the way they do because of their biology. The Klingons are naturally bloodthirsty.
Would you agree that one of the things that makes a Klingon warrior so formidable is his predatory instinct, his bloodlust, if you will?
I'd agree with that.
And the Ferengi are naturally greedy.
We were warned about the Ferengi at the Academy. Warned about Ferengi, were you? That's right.
Oh my god! He cannot be more Ferengi! The big ears, the beady eyes, the greedy thing they do with their hands. Ferengi are the most untrustworthy race in the galaxy. He probably just wants to lure us over there so he can mug us!
Starfleet characters spotting an alien and treating them differently because they're alien happens several times in the mythos.
I am Rondon, you despicable melanoid slime worm!
Who do you think you're bullying? You bumped into me. It was your mistake. You were at fault. Do you want this to become violent?
Friend, I like you.
When he raised his hand, I saw that it was webbed, the sign of a Zaldan. Zaldans are infuriated by courtesy. They view it as a form of phony social behavior designed to cover true feelings.
Now, I get that this is just writing efficiency for the most part, but it's kind of fucked up how often Star Trek paints an entire species with the same brush. The insert race or insert profession is a common refrain in Star Trek dialogue.
This looks like the remains of a pheromonic sensor. They're known to be favored by Flaxian assassins. And it just so happens, a Flaxian came aboard the station just this morning.
In a way, the first episode of Star Trek Discovery confronts this very idea.
Considering your background, I would think you're the last person to make assumptions based on race.
With respect, it would be unwise to confuse race and culture.
Whenever the Vulcans crossed paths with Klingons, the Vulcans fired first. They said hello in a language the Klingons understood. Violence brought respect. Respect brought peace.
Captain Georgiou and Admiral Anderson refuse to fire first, even when it's obvious the Klingons have clearly shown up for a fight. And even during the battle, Anderson tries calling for a ceasefire. Why? Because Georgiou and Anderson feel, consciously or otherwise, that their moral code is the right one. Everyone should want peace, and if they don't, they aren't as evolved as us. Again, this is not the intention of the episode, but taken along with how these themes have been explored in Star Trek before, that is the implication. Deep Space Nine even brought this up directly through the character of Michael Eddington.
Nobody leaves paradise. Everyone should want to be in the Federation. Hell, you even want the Cardassians to join. You're only sending them replicators because one day they can take their rightful place on the Federation Council.
Deep Space Nine also further complicates matters with the introduction of Section 31. Once again, if we take Star Trek's reasoning, that humans are naturally savage and can only advance by controlling their nature, then Section 31's existence is fully justified. Humanity and the Federation at large can only live in a utopia because Section 31 is there to do the dirty work that needs doing. It's a philosophy based on the idea that people cannot be trusted, that left to their own devices, people will give in to their savage nature, and an organization like Section 31 will always be needed to keep the peace. What makes Section 31 such a disturbing idea is that there's never really a retort to this philosophy. Sisko et al. Dislike Section 31's methods, but they never definitively discount the idea that their existence has been necessary. Who knows how close the Federation has come to complete collapse, only to be saved by Section 31 working in the shadows. However, there is a counter-argument to this philosophy, and it is one which the creative minds behind Star Trek should perhaps consider adopting.
And what he might say with irony, I say with conviction. What a piece of work is man.
In his book Humankind: A Hopeful History, which I'm half ripping off for this video, Dutch historian Rutger Bregman brings up the work of philosopher Jacques Rousseau, whose core argument is the ideological counter to Thomas Hobbes. In the essay which made him famous, he says, "The first man who, after enclosing a piece of ground, took it into his head to say, 'This is mine,' and found people simple enough to believe him, was the true founder of civil society. How many crimes, how many wars, how many murders, how many misfortunes and horrors would that man have saved the human species who, by pulling up the stakes and filling in the ditches, should have cried to his fellows, 'Be sure not to listen to this impostor. You are lost if you forget that the fruits of the earth belong equally to us all, and underneath the earth itself, to nobody.'"
So, what does this mean?
Essentially what Rousseau is saying here is that humans are not naturally selfish or aggressive or savage, but it's the systems which reward that kind of behaviour which are responsible for the strife in society. After all, how can the evils of politics, religion, and war be illustrative of human nature when these things are not natural? According to Rousseau, the evils of the world are the result of the corruption of human nature, not its expression. Now, when it comes to arguing in favour of human goodness, there's a lot to cover. There's our negativity bias, which makes it seem as though the world is a crime-infested, war-torn hell always on the brink of collapse, despite the actual state of the world being far better than most people think. There are famous experiments which supposedly prove humanity's dark nature being either outright fraudulent or misinterpreted, and the reason why humans became the dominant species on the planet being because we are the most social life forms on Earth rather than the most aggressive or competitive. As I said, it's a lot, and if you're interested to know more, I'll once again recommend Humankind: A Hopeful History. I'm not being paid to say that or anything, it's just a really good book. But if Star Trek dropped the ball in its portrayal of human nature, there is a popular science fiction mythos which gets it right. Star Trek.
I don't think I understand you. I can understand your confusion.
Whenever the concept of innate human goodness is brought up, cynics will be quick to point to war as proof of humanity's savage nature. But is this really the result of human nature? In A Taste of Armageddon, both Anan 7 and Captain Kirk refer to the act of killing as instinctual.
We're a killer species. It's instinctive. It's the same with you. All right. It's instinctive.
However, according to research dating back to World War II, it turns out that it's actually incredibly difficult to convince two human beings to try and kill one another. The phenomenon of soldiers deliberately aiming too high to avoid hitting their target is well known from the book Men Against Fire by military historian S.L.A. Marshall. The trauma felt by soldiers is not just because of what was done to them by the enemy, it's what they were made to do to the enemy in the first place. The very act of marching to war and going into battle goes against our fundamental human nature.
One of the women threw me a phaser, and I fired. The man just incinerated, there before my eyes. I'd never killed anything before. It's not you I hate, Cardassian. I hate what I became because of you.
This is what makes the Jem'Hadar so terrifying in Deep Space Nine, because they have no concept of the sanctity of life. The Jem'Hadar are brutally efficient because they will kill anyone and anything at the drop of a hat if told to do so, and feel nothing afterwards. It's telling that this trait had to be artificially instilled into the Jem'Hadar. Killing isn't even a natural instinct for them, but something which had to be engineered by the founders. Klingons don't even like killing and death as much as their culture would suggest. Despite Klingons insisting that death in glorious battle is worthwhile and honourable, they still mourn the loss of their comrades and do their best to preserve the lives of their soldiers. This is the main conflict between General Martok and Chancellor Gowron in DS9's final season. Gowron needlessly throws away Klingon lives in unwinnable battles to make Martok look bad. If Klingons were genuinely as bloodthirsty as they claim, if they were naturally predisposed to relishing death in glorious battle, then surely Martok wouldn't feel the way he does. On some level, Martok, Worf, and most other Klingons understand the sanctity of life. The social bonds between their fellow Klingons supersede their supposedly natural instinct for killing. This storyline illustrates how this naturalist argument can be weaponized by those in power. We're told Klingons have an innate bloodlust, and it is an honourable act for a Klingon to embrace this nature and seek glorious battle. Winning great victories or dying heroically makes a Klingon a credit to their species. Therefore, the descendants of great conquerors or venerated heroes are said to be those of noble blood. However, it's made clear in TNG and DS9 that the House of Duras and Chancellor Gowron did not attain power through winning great victories or making heroic sacrifices. They are simply members of the nobility. Their power is evidence of their honour, an honour which was achieved by their ancestors embracing their Klingon nature and seeking battle. It's a circular argument. They deserve their power because they have power. To say otherwise is to question their honour, to question the very essence of what makes them Klingon. The way forward for the Klingon people is to abandon the notion that waging war is simply in their nature, and those who have taken the most spoils of war are the most honourable, because more often than not, this naturalist argument in favour of the power structures of the Empire only helps the worst of Klingon society.
Who was the last leader of the High Council that you respected? And how many times have you had to cover up the crimes of Klingon leaders because you were told that it was for the good of the Empire? The truth is, you have been willing to accept a government that you know is corrupt. Gowron is just the latest example.
It also stifles progress in other areas like science.
I don't think Klingons regard scientists very highly. She always seemed a little defensive.
And blinds them to other ways in which they could help their society.
You said there was an enemy for us to fight.
They are attempting to plant their fields before the sun sets. Time is their enemy. We should help them defeat it.
And just as the Klingons are not naturally predisposed to waging war, the Ferengi are not naturally predisposed to being greedy. It's worth noting that within Ferengi culture, being good at business is framed as an instinct. A Ferengi either has the lobes or they don't.
My father is a mechanical genius. He could have been chief engineer of a starship if he'd had the opportunity. But he went into business like a good Ferengi.
If you're not good at business, then you aren't a real Ferengi, because it's natural for a Ferengi to be greedy. Once again, arguing that Ferengi society is a natural result of Ferengi instincts only benefits a small few. It's clear there's a large contingent of Ferengi society who don't want things to be this way. I mean, for God's sake, there's an episode where Rom literally quotes Karl Marx.
Workers of the world, unite! You have nothing to lose but your chains.
But if there are two alien races in Star Trek which epitomize Rousseau's ideas, they are the Cardassians and Bajorans. Unlike the Vulcans, Klingons, or Ferengi, neither the Cardassians or Bajorans embody a single trait in Star Trek. They are shown to be multifaceted people with complex societies and rich cultures. True, the Cardassian nation has been a tyrannical empire for most of Star Trek history, and their military is responsible for countless atrocities, but this is never shown to be the result of some biological imperative. The Cardassian Empire is ruled absolutely by the military, and its citizenry is under constant surveillance from the Obsidian Order. The Cardassian justice system is always rigged in the state's favour, and the ordinary citizen has no voice in their government. Under these oppressive circumstances, it's easy to see why so many Cardassians would rather drink the Kool-Aid and do as they're told, rather than speak out. But free of these power structures, the Cardassians show themselves to be, more often than not, sociable, loyal, and even kind. The Cardassian occupation of Bajor was justified by rhetoric and enforced through violence.
From the moment we arrived on Bajor, it was clear that we were the superior race. Militarily, technologically, culturally. We were almost a century ahead of them in every way.
But despite the efforts of the Central Command, many Cardassians still felt that deep down what they did to the Bajoran people was wrong.
You didn't commit those crimes, and you couldn't stop them. You were only one man.
Oh, no, don't you see? I have to be punished. We all have to be punished.
Why are you doing this?
For Cardassia. Cardassia will only survive if it stands in front of Bajor and admits the truth. My trial will force Cardassia to acknowledge its guilt. And we're guilty, all of us. My death is necessary.
What you're asking for is another murder. Enough good people have already died.
Did I mention Deep Space Nine is the best Star Trek show, by the way? Likewise, the Bajorans are fundamentally good people at heart, but the power structures within their society are sometimes taken advantage of by extremists like Kai Wynn. The way the Bajoran religion is handled in Deep Space Nine is another example of that show's exceedingly strong writing. Whereas TNG adhered to the linear societal evolution concept, which frames any belief in the supernatural as barbaric, Deep Space Nine treats religious belief with more respect.
With all this stuff about the Celestial Temple and the wormhole, it's done.
No, it's not. You've got to realize something, Jake. For over 50 years, the one thing that allowed the Bajorans to survive the Cardassian occupation was their faith. My point is, it's a matter of interpretation. It may not be what you believe, but that doesn't make it wrong.
We are shown many times how Bajorans are helped by their religion, and told how it was a uniting force during the Cardassian occupation. However, we are also shown how their religion can be abused by those in power, and used to justify violent enforcement of the status quo.
He fell from the second level. His neck was broken on impact.
Did anyone see it happen?
I pushed him. His family name is Muta. Their Dajara is unclean.
You killed him because of his Dajara?
I had to.
Again, it's as Rousseau said, good-natured people being corrupted by the artificial systems imposed on them by the few who would benefit from them.
Give yourself over to the prophets. I'll do whatever it takes to make myself worthy in their eyes. Everything will change once you step down as Kai. Step down? I don't understand. Why would I do that? Eminence, being in power, is what led you on the wrong path.
This is why I think Star Trek could stand to rethink its assessment of humanity. Is the way forward to a brighter future dependent on us all individually learning to control our savage nature, or is it achieved by everyone working together to create systems which bring out the goodness inherent in us all? The former leaves the road murky. When exactly do we know when we're all evolved enough to create that better future? Do we just have to wait around until the Vulcans show up to help us out? But if we embrace the latter, if we believe that we already have everything we need to create a brighter future, we can be active in making it a reality. The way forward is much clearer. If Star Trek is to continue inspiring future generations, the choice of which philosophy to embrace seems obvious. The Star Trek mythos is famous for its optimistic vision of the future. Whereas other works of science fiction show us marching towards a haunting dystopia or retaining many of our present problems for centuries to come, Star Trek stands out as a work of science fiction which definitively states the future will be better and brighter than the present we live in, and the human race will move beyond prejudice, poverty, and war. It's also a surprisingly rustic-looking future. Despite the presence of highly advanced, physics-defying technologies, the future seen in Star Trek features a lot of log cabins and turn-of-the-century architecture. There's also the conspicuous absence of automation and cybernetics, as well as the lack of advanced robotics. In the 90s, this was almost certainly the result of budget constraints, but even modern Star Trek couldn't resist opening Strange New Worlds with another log cabin. When Star Trek is contrasted with another utopian future like the one seen in Ian M. Banks' Culture series, Star Trek seems downright low-tech. In the Culture, space habitats and megastructures, genetic engineering, cyberware, artificial life forms, personal shields, teleportation, holographics, and sentient supercomputers are all commonplace. Most of these elements can also be found in other popular sci-fi universes like Star Wars, Babylon 5, Farscape, and Mass Effect. Meanwhile, in Star Trek,
I must try and cure this poor, sick vine.
Which begs the question, why is there such a conspicuous absence of certain technologies which are commonplace in other sci-fi? Considering the title of this video series, it should come as no surprise that the answer lies in philosophy. It's ironic that despite how obsessive some fans are over the finer details of fictional technologies, at its heart the Star Trek mythos is romantic. Now, when I use the term romantic, I'm referring to Romanticism, the artistic and literary movement which swept Europe in the late 18th century. At the time, another movement was the Age of Enlightenment, which went hand in hand with the Industrial Revolution. Huge technological, scientific, and philosophical progress was being made across many nations. Every day felt like it brought new discoveries, new technologies, and new ideas. But amidst this progress, there were also new forms of strife and despair. Instead of working in fields, on farms, people were suddenly trapped on production lines in smog-filled factories. Instead of gazing at nature in awe, all of its mechanics were being quantified and rationalized by science. The Romantic movement was an attempt to preserve emotionality and individualism. It was a reaction against what many saw as the slow death of passion, beauty, and wonder. Star Trek certainly encourages us to champion science and technology, but only in a way that enriches the human spirit. Star Trek's characters are passionate explorers, not detached observers. The universe they're exploring and the ships they travel on are heavily romanticized. The emphasis is always on the human rather than the empirical. Star Trek shows us a future in which our humanity, our empathy, compassion, wisdom, etc., has evolved in tandem with our technological advancement. This idea pops up very early on in the original series. In fact, the spirit of the idea is present in its second pilot episode, Where No Man Has Gone Before. Although Mitchell's rapid evolution into a godlike being occurs without technological assistance, we are still presented with this idea that Mitchell is advancing too quickly and losing his sense of humanity.
Before long, we'll be where it would have taken mankind millions of years of learning to reach.
And what will Mitchell learn on getting there? Will he know what to do with his power? Will he acquire the wisdom?
Please go back while you still can.
Did you hear him joke about compassion? Above all else, a god needs compassion!
This theme is then revisited many times throughout the original series, though with a more explicit focus on technology. Many episodes of the original series are concerned with just how much of our lives we should hand over to technology. Episodes like A Taste of Armageddon and The Ultimate Computer show how, by letting computers run everything, we risk losing something of our collective humanity. This is something which works brilliantly in A Taste of Armageddon. Although the advanced computers on NMER-7 and Vendikar allow both worlds to wage war without destroying either civilization, Kirk et al. Can see this system, one where people freely march into disintegration machines if they are reported killed by a computer, for what it is: utter insanity. It takes Kirk's intervention to remind both worlds of the human cost of war.
Death, destruction, disease, horror. That's what war is all about. Anon. That's what makes it a thing to be avoided. You've made it neat and painless. So neat and painless, you've had no reason to stop it.
Recognizing this underlying theme also helps explain Star Trek's conspicuous lack of automation. In The Ultimate Computer, Daystrom's new Starship computer is an incredible invention, but one which risks damaging the humanity of the noble space explorers featured in Star Trek stories. Yes, it makes perfectly logical sense to use robotic spaceships for reasons of safety and efficiency, but what about the human experience of exploration? What about enriching the human spirit by satiating the desire for discovery? And how that discovery can inspire others.
All I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer by. You could feel the wind at your back in those days. The sounds of the sea beneath you. And even if you take away the wind and the water, it's still the same. The ship is yours. You can feel her. And the stars are still there, Bones.
The Ultimate Computer takes this even further by falling back on the age-old sci-fi trope of the machine escaping the control of its creators and turning on humanity. This trope comes up with surprising frequency throughout Star Trek. Even modern Star Trek fell back on this trope in Star Trek Discovery's second season, with the chief antagonist being revealed as a rogue AI. But even in episodes like TNG's Interface, there are always unforeseen flaws in the designs of technologies which could impinge on our humanity. In Star Trek, machines can be miraculous things, but they're also cold and emotionless, incapable of empathy or compassion. Even highly advanced thinking machines can be tricked into defeating themselves via irreconcilable logical paradoxes. But other devices can also dissect the human mind and literally drain us of what makes us who we are, as seen in episodes like Dagger of the Mind, or to a lesser extent The Enemy Within. The technologies featured in these stories are all undeniably remarkable achievements of science and engineering, but in each instance, Star Trek asks us to consider what we might lose in our pursuit of more advanced ways of living. In contrast to the evil machinery and computers run amok in the original series, Data is kind, loyal, and caring. However, it's worth noting that these positive traits of Data come about as a result of his quest to become more human. Despite being physically and intellectually superior to humans in many ways, Data recognizes the worth of the human qualities in his shipmates. His positive impact on the world and the lives of those around him is a direct result of his embracing his humanity. This is the crux of the episode The Measure of a Man. Maddox can only see the practical benefit of studying Data in the hopes of making more like him. He's so obsessed with the pursuit of technology that he overlooks the possibility that Data is a life form with certain inalienable rights which will be harmed by his work. It's also worth noting that Picard's winning argument doesn't actually answer the question of Data's sentience one way or the other. He simply advocates that Maddox and Starfleet in general consider the harm they could do if they let their pursuit of technology override their sense of humanity. The core characters in The Next Generation aren't immune to this kind of thinking, however, as seen in episodes like Quality of Life and Force of Nature. The former deals with a conflict similar to The Measure of a Man, but this time it's Data arguing for the rights of machines which even his fellow crew members see as mere tools. In the latter, Geordi is offended at the very notion that warp drive could be harmful in any way. However, by the end of both stories, the characters recognize their short-sightedness and make sure to consider the human cost of these technologies going forward. But this wisdom hasn't just restricted technology, it's also allowed us to apply technology where it can do the most good. Take replicators for example. If they came about at an earlier point in time, they'd likely be sold as luxury products and dominate pretty much every market. Users would perhaps have to buy the patterns to synthesize new objects, or maybe even pay an ongoing subscription. But in Star Trek, when this technology was invented, it was given out freely and effectively ended poverty, crime, and war. The creators of the technology recognized its benefit for the whole world rather than only themselves. This is why the Borg are the ultimate antagonists in Star Trek, because they represent the dark mirror image of the Federation. While the Federation have tempered their pursuit of advanced technology with empathy and wisdom, the Borg's pursuit of advanced technology has overridden these impulses. All that matters to the Borg is progress, to advance further and further towards what they see as perfection. While ideals like individual freedoms, collective well-being, diversity, and equal opportunity are paramount to the Federation, to the Borg, anything can be sacrificed in favor of more and more advanced technology.
One day, soon, man is going to be able to harness incredible energies that could ultimately hurl us to other worlds in some sort of spaceship. And the men that reach out into space will be able to find ways to feed the hungry millions of the world and to cure their diseases. They will be able to find a way to give each man hope.
Advanced technology is not something we should fear. What we should fear is what we could lose in the relentless drive for progress. Star Trek is by no means anti-technology, but it recognizes that technology is meant to serve humanity, not the other way around. Technology is not meant to intrude on our lives or control us, but to expand our lives and liberate us as individuals and as a society. When we lose sight of that, we risk becoming slaves to technology rather than the masters of it.
Computers make excellent and efficient servants, but I have no wish to serve under them.
The Star Trek mythos is famous for its optimistic vision of the future, whereas other works of science fiction show us marching towards a haunting dystopia or retaining many of our present problems for centuries to come, Star Trek stands out as a work of science fiction which definitively states the future will be better and brighter than the present we live in, and the human race will move beyond prejudice, poverty, and war. The future depicted in Star Trek is nothing short of a utopia. Now, utopia means different things to different people in practice, but what I mean to say is that Star Trek's future seems to be free of all of our modern-day problems. People live happy, healthy, and fulfilling lives, society is egalitarian, and the world is full of remarkable advanced technology which can be used without risking damage to the environment. A world free of all our current problems would seem to fit the literal definition of utopia. This is why the following question might seem strange. When we live in a utopia, what comes next?
People are no longer obsessed with the accumulation of things. We have eliminated hunger, want, the need for possessions. We've grown out of our infancy.
If we run with this metaphor from Picard, that human civilization of the past was childlike in its irresponsibility, then human civilization of the 24th century has fully matured into an adult form, ideally secure and prosperous, ready to foster the next generation. If we think of the concept of utopia in this way, then that would suggest that the future civilization seen in Star Trek is the apex of the human race. We've 100% completed being a civilization. All of our problems have been eliminated and now we can just sit back and enjoy life until further notice. This conception of utopia runs throughout the original series and the Next Generation. Many stories in both shows feature Kirk and Co. or Picard et al. Teaching life lessons to a less developed society. These are episodes like A Taste of Armageddon or Symbiosis, where an alien society has a problem resembling something in our world, which is fixed by the more enlightened future humans. Or there's the danger of this future utopia slipping back into barbarism in episodes like Errand of Mercy. Even when encountering godlike alien entities, these entities often behave more like spoiled children. Then there's Q, who sets tests for humanity, which they usually pass. Even in episodes like Hyde and Q, enlightened humans demonstrate their wisdom to know when to refrain from too much power. The greatest dangers posed to this utopia either come from the past, in episodes like The Drumhead, which echo McCarthyism and the Red Scare, or they come from outside forces which threaten the Federation. Originally, the TNG episode Conspiracy was meant to reveal Starfleet's Admiralty as corrupt, but this was nixed by Roddenberry, who insisted Starfleet never be portrayed in a negative light. Indeed, Roddenberry's conception of Star Trek's future is utopian to the extreme. In his novelization of Star Trek the Motion Picture, humanity is said to exist almost in a form of collective consciousness, and has become so agreeable and harmonious that the so-called less advanced humans of Starfleet are needed to protect a paradise like Earth. This is a vision of utopia so extreme that at times it verges on puritanical. Allegedly during the making of the TNG episode The Bonding, Roddenberry stated that in the 24th century, children have been taught to deal with death from a young age, so Jeremy Astor wouldn't be so distraught over losing his mother. I don't know about you, but I find that idea more disturbing than optimistic. Roddenberry's utopia is so absolute that according to TOS and TNG, the only place for humanity to go is into the realm of the metaphysical.
That is the exploration that awaits you. Not mapping stars and studying nebula, but charting the unknown possibilities of existence.
Over the years, it seems many fans as well as some cast and crew members have taken Roddenberry's vision to heart. Any deviation from this wholly optimistic and conflict-free vision of the future is seen by many as inherently anti-Star Trek. In an interview with If magazine, George Takei once said Deep Space Nine was the polar opposite of Roddenberry's vision, and more recently Discovery and Picard received vocal backlash for their darker tone and graphic content. Even Discovery's 3rd and 4th season Status Quo, which sees the main characters fighting to rebuild a fractured Federation, seems to suggest that the Federation itself was the height of civilization. The only place for it to go was to fall apart, so it could one day be put back together again. However, thinking about utopia in this way can be very limiting and often prompts a rather cynical response. Many people believe that utopia is flat out impossible. This was reflected in my community tab when I announced this video. One user in particular stated outright that utopia is a lie. While I'm generally an optimistic person, I can sympathize with this cynicism. The problems of our modern world can often seem so insurmountable, especially when we're deluged by negative news on a daily basis. How could we ever hope to achieve a utopia when there's so much wrong with the world? In reacting to utopia this way, and Star Trek's future in particular, this kind of cynicism has led some publications to paint Star Trek's future as secretly dystopian rather than utopian. In a way, these kinds of videos echo Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Sure, this world may seem perfect, but scratch the surface and there's a dark, soul-crushing truth underpinning it all. However, these kinds of reactions rest on conceiving of utopia as the end point of civilization, an impossible goal which will forever lie out of our reach. However, we can alter our conception of what a utopia is to better reflect the world we actually live in and pave the way for a brighter future like the one seen in Star Trek. In the book Utopia for Realists by Rutger Bregman, he points out that if we were to travel back in time to the medieval era and ask the average peasant to imagine utopia, they would probably paint a picture of a world very much like our own. Things we take for granted, like heated homes with running water, weren't even available to the kings of the Middle Ages. Every major concern to a medieval peasant, every societal ill in their day, has essentially been remedied or outright fixed in today's world. We also possess technologies which a medieval peasant could only dream of as magic. Sure, we have plenty of problems in today's world, but try explaining the issues of an ad-based internet economy to a peasant after handing them an instant worldwide communication device. This point is articulated very well not by Star Trek, but in Babylon 5.
I think we lost interest in the future when all the things we were told were coming finally got here. It wasn't what we thought it was going to be. It's like when you keep bugging your folks for that one special toy for Christmas, and when you finally get it, it's not as great as the vids made it look. It just doesn't run right.
Maybe somebody should have labeled the future "Some Assembly Required."
Star Trek's future is a utopia to us, but not for the people living in it. A world without poverty, disease, or war seems miraculous, even impossible, but that's just life for the average Federation citizen. They expect faster-than-light travel and matter-energy replicators the same way we expect running water and the internet. The book Utopia for Realists opens with an apt quote from Oscar Wilde which says, "A map of the world which does not include utopia is not worth even glancing at, for it leaves out the one country at which humanity is always landing. And when humanity lands there, it looks out and, seeing a better country, sets sail. Progress is the realization of utopias." Maybe George Takei was right because it seems Deep Space Nine conceives of utopia differently to Gene Roddenberry. Consciously or not, DS9 adopts Wilde's perspective on utopia. Star Trek's future is truly amazing, built by many monumental achievements of a united and prosperous human race. But that's only our perspective, one facilitated by the episodic morality tales featuring the Starship Enterprise. But for the people who aren't gallivanting off to a new planet every week, for the people who have to stay in one place and live life, the Federation isn't perfect. This bright future still has some problems, and these are problems which don't stem from the resurgence of an old regressive idea or from an outside alien threat. Ironically, the problems shown in DS9 stem from those who conceive of the Federation the way Roddenberry conceived of Utopia. Admiral Layton and Section 31 both see Utopia as an absolute. Nothing should ever threaten it or change it, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to preserve paradise. The Federation's record isn't squeaky clean either. The biggest blotch is their handling of the Maquis.
Open your eyes, Captain. Why is the Federation so obsessed with the Maquis? Because we've left the Federation, and that's the one thing you can't accept. Nobody leaves paradise. Everyone should want to be in the Federation. Hell, you even want the Cardassians to join.
Did I mention Deep Space Nine is the best Star Trek show? The point of arcs like this is not to tear down the image of an optimistic future, but to show that Utopia is an ongoing process. Once we've conquered the problems of our modern world, we shouldn't just sit back and stagnate. There will always be new problems to solve and new horizons to explore.
We are constantly searching, not just for answers to our questions, but for new questions.
That's not to say nothing will ever change, in fact, quite the opposite. The world has changed and is changing all the time. We just don't notice it usually.
It's life, Jake. You can miss it if you don't open your eyes.
Utopia isn't a lie, we just tend to think of it the wrong way. Don't think of Utopia as the end. Instead, think of Utopia as a map which shows us the way forward.
What is it that you're trying to tell me?
You'll find out. In any case, I'll be watching. See you out there.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video and want to see more, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to stay up to date on future uploads. On my Patreon, you can see videos early and ad-free. The link is in the description. Thank you to all of my patrons and members, with an ultra thanks to Eamon Kelly, Michael Hardy, County Arc, Mike Halsey, Olivia Computer, Bano, Jaron Walker, Tom, Director Kate, Patrick Fleming, Matthew Camille, Lilac Yane, Edmark Star, Extreme Streamers, Howard Craig Kervik, and AS Caging 101. Thank you once again for watching, and until next time, have a good one.